Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, we're talking about elder abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, that's right, I am a lawyer, and elder abuse is a very pernicious crime. Joe Biden might be the latest victim. He had a press conference today where I got to hand it to the guy. About 2 hours he was out there in front of the cameras, and a lot of my criticism about this presidency on this show has been that Joe Biden has been absent and not available, but he was very available today, and it was a very interesting long press conference. He took a lot of questions. We were debating about this morning on Locals. How many questions was he going to take? Was he going to take like 2 questions or 5 questions or 10 questions? And he went for a long time. And his physical posture actually changed over the course of the press conference. I mean, he sort of came out fully energized and juiced up. And then by the end of it, he was like leaning over off his podium, like dripping like molasses off the side of the bench there. And so you're wondering, what the heck is going on over here? But we've got a lot to break down because I've got clips out the wazoo of what we heard today. And it's not all going to be Joe Biden. We're going to check in because he mentioned the Voting Rights Act that's going on in Congress right now. They're really trying to ram this thing through. It's going to fail. But we've got some commentary from Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, the representative of the Democrats. And then we've got also Mitch McConnell, who is out there saying today is like one of the most important day in the Senate, is what McConnell said. Big statement from him. So we're going to hear from him. And we're also, since we're talking about voting rights, we're going to ask ourselves, Joe Biden specifically, hey, Joe, do you think that this next election is going to be fair? What do you have to say about that? Because, you know, that's kind of a prickly issue these days. A lot of people got thrown off the internet for taking the wrong side of that issue. What do you have to say about that, Joe? So he'll get asked that. And then we're going to transition abroad. We're going to talk more about this Russia-Ukraine conflict that is unfolding in front of our very eyes. Certainly feels like all of the usual suspects are beating the drums of war. Very excited. I feel like we're being sold this new war, really, I guess what it is. But it just feels like they're really trying to make this thing into a thing and really make it happen. And so we're going to break this down. We've got Secretary of State Blinken. He's meeting with the Ukrainian diplomats. Joe Biden came out during his press conference and what was actually very sort of aggressive towards Russia, sort of, and then kind of walked that back. So we've got a lot to break through and a lot to break down. And I'm glad that you're a part of the show. If you want to be even more involved, you can submit a super chat just like John did. Says, been trying to get a super chat out to you for a month now. YouTube finally let me. Just wanted to say you were by far the most astute lawyer on YouTube. Well, that is just the nicest thing you've ever said. John, you're going to make me blush. Stop it. My wife and I both have PhDs and find your commentary to be stimulating. John, stop it. Woo! It's getting hot in here, my man. You're killing me. He also says, don't always agree with your politics. We should be a little bit less transphobe, but generally you're doing a fantastic job. Keep it up. Well, all right. Thanks, John. I appreciate the comment. I can always use a little polishing around the margins. No question about that. I have some rough edges. I acknowledge it, and I appreciate the nice feedback. I'm glad that you guys, I'm glad that you and your wife are enjoying the show and listening. I really do appreciate it. But also, over at Locals, there is a form that looks like this. They're chatting away over there. We've got Tweak, Black Cat Meow, Resident Bedoin. We've got Jumpin' Jeff, all having a good time. And we had a nice little show prep stream this morning as well. So be sure you check out our community. We're having a lot of fun over there. All right, so let's get into the main topics of the day. We've got President Biden press conference, first one of 2022, and it's, okay, reasonable. We're still in January, it's the 19th, but he's kind of been absent over these last few days. Yesterday on the show, we talked about his long absence over the 3-day weekend, then flew back into town on Tuesday, and then did nothing today in preparation for this press conference. You can see literally nothing on his agenda other than getting a daily brief, so that's like four and a half full days of nothing. And he really needed that energy because he came out today, man, and he went for about 2 hours. I was kind of shocked. I was like, is he going to keel over? What's going on here? What kind of vitamins did they give him this morning? Because he had some oomph in his step today. And I want to go through most of the Q&A, a lot of the questions that he was fielding today, because that's really where a lot of the more interesting stuff was. And he spent, obviously, the bulk of the day in that portion of the press conference. He came out and gave a traditional speech. He's got a new executive order coming out that I couldn't get my hands on for today's show, something about making more businesses competitive. Very curious what that's going to be looking like, whether his, competitive reform efforts are going to be capitalistic or not. We'll see what those look like. But he had a couple little things around the margins that he was going to be changing, but nothing really consequential. And so we're going to sort of summarize all of the speech portion of this with this one clip, which I really think is the theme of the clip. And I want to be fair to Biden about this. He's saying that things are going to get better, right? That's the theme of this entire speech. I know it's bad. I know the numbers are bad, but we're really in the first quarter of this game here. And we've got a lot of runway left on this. And I think that there is some truth to that. I mean, I got to be honest about this. Afghanistan feels like it was like 3 years ago, doesn't it? I mean, we've had so many other catastrophes in between Afghanistan, and this administration has had so many failures. It's just like, wow. Yeah, that was in what? That was in last summer? Feels like it was like, last decade, because there's been so many just, problems, really. But he's now going to say things are going to get better, right? And I think that there's some truth to that. So, the COVID thing is probably going to continue to, I'm not even going to say it, but, it's going to continue to develop, and society is going to continue to live with it. And we're going to see that things sort of return back to normal, whether the government's involved or not, right? People are sort of going that direction anyways. And so things may just get better, not as a consequence of Joe Biden, just as a consequence of people just moving on with their lives, just naturally, right? Time sort of heals the wounds. And so, things actually might get better, not because of Joe Biden, but in spite of Joe Biden. And people have short memories, right? People forget about stuff. And so if we fast forward 3 years and, Donald Trump's up there and they start, going hog wild with him, are people going to remember Afghanistan? If you're a Democrat, do you care about any of these things anymore? Do the schools matter? Or do you sort of go back into a dripping, rabid rabies mode? I don't know. I don't know how it feels to be somebody like that, but I could easily see how they could shift into that mode. So here's the theme. Joe Biden is saying everything's going to get better. I know it looks dark right now, but here, stick with me. I promise. We're in the first quarter. We've got 3 more years. I'm just getting started. All right, cut me some slack. Here's what he says.
Many states and school districts have spent this money very well. Unfortunately, some haven't. I encourage the states and school districts that use the funding to protect our children and keep our schools open. Use it. The COVID-19 is not going to give up and accept things. It's not going to go away immediately. But I'm not going to give up and accept things as they are now. Some people may call what's happening now the new normal. I call it a job not yet finished. It will get better. We're moving toward a time when COVID-19 won't disrupt our daily lives.
All right, so you can see, okay, Joe, like we want things to get better too. We hope it does get better, Don't think you're going to be involved in anything there, but okay. So you can see the theme, and this is something that, they're going to have to keep pounding, because when you're sort of at the rock bottom, that's really kind of the only argument you can make. And he's trending down that direction. You can see what's happening with the financials, and I think we're just getting started. So that's the theme. He's going to go through a lot of this, that same sort of language. But we're going to fast forward all that, right? All of that is just policy fluff. He says a lot of that, a lot of, progress and goals and optimism and all that. Okay, fine. Let's get to the questions now. Fast forward. First question comes out from this gentleman, and he's going to be going through the litany here. He's going to say, hey, Joe, problem. Do you have a solution? Yes or no? What is your answer?
Thank you, Mr. President. I know some of my colleagues will get into some specific issues, but I wanted to zoom out on your first year in office. Inflation is up. Your signature domestic legislation is stalled in Congress. In a few hours from now, the Senate, an effort in the Senate to deal with voting rights and voting reform legislation is going to fail.
Yeah.
COVID-19 is still taking the lives of 1,500 Americans every day, and the nation's divisions are just as raw as they were a year ago. Did you overpromise to the American public what you could achieve in your first year in office, and how do you plan to course correct going forward?
Why are you such an optimist? Look,
Womp.
I didn't overpromise. But I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen.
Yeah, I
The
guess
fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where we have made enormous progress. You mentioned the number of deaths from COVID. Well, it was 3 times that not long ago. It's coming down. Everything's changing. It's getting better. Look, I didn't overpromise, but I think if you take a look at what we've been able to do, you'd have to acknowledge we made enormous progress. But one of the things that I think is something that, one thing I haven't been able to do so far.
What is it, Joe?
Get my Republican friends to get in the game of making things better in this country.
Oh, it's the Republicans' fault, dang it. Oh, dang it. Everything was good. Actually, Joe Biden has outperformed. I guess he's still vertical, so I guess he's outperforming some people's metrics, but that's good. But you can see like a lot of this language, making good progress, don't know what you're talking about, progress. COVID is difficult, but our numbers are in fact better, and they've been playing this game where they sort of are picking and choosing what numbers and what metrics are most useful for them. So let's take a look. I think we had that question. Now we have another one. So this is a follow-up. Now we've got, a lot of these gigantic centerpiece issues: voting rights, spending packages, build back better. We've got all of these things that were the prime domestic policies that needed to be passed. And remember, this is like his golden era of his presidency. When you get into a new relationship and you're like, wow, I just really like this person a lot. I can't wait to spend time with them all the time. It's that golden area, that honeymoon phase. He's got the White House, he's got the Senate, he's got the House of Representatives. That's the trifecta. It's the golden ticket. And he hasn't done anything consequential as a result of it. In fact, he's sort of going the opposite direction. His party seems as fractured as ever. And so somebody asks him about that. Hey, Joe, your primary policy achievements are all going right into the toilet. And he says, that's true. That's true. He says it fast, but catch it. He knows.
Your spending package, voting rights legislation, they're not going anywhere. So
That's true.
Is there anything that you are confident you can get signed into law before the midterm elections?
Yes, I'm confident we can get pieces, big chunks of the Build Back Better law signed into law. And I'm confident that we can take the case to the American people that the people they should be voting for, who are going to oversee whether the elections in fact are legit or not, should not be those who are being put up by the Republicans to determine that they're going to be able to change the outcome of the election.
What?
So whether or not we can actually get an election. And by the way,
What?
I haven't given up. We haven't finished the vote yet on what's going on voting rights and the John Lewis bill and others. But
That's what she's talking about.
Look,
That's happening tonight.
I've been engaged a long time in public policy, and I don't know many things that have been done in one fell swoop. And so I think the most important thing to do is try to inform, not educate, inform the public
Okay.
of what's at stake
What is
in
it?
stark terms. And
Tell
let
us.
them make judgments and let them know who's for them and who's against them, who's there and who's not there, and make that the case. And that's what I'm going to be spending my time doing in this off-year election.
Okay, so I don't really know what he's talking about, but at the end there, I think he was going towards messaging, right? The idea being that the American public doesn't know what's going on, and this administration has a messaging problem. And so Joe Biden, a big theme today was that he's going to get out there this next election year and really bring his message home to America, because that's what Americans want to see. More Joe Biden. They can't wait for him to show up in their backyard, and they can have a scoop of ice cream with him and just chuckle about the good old days or something. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to hit the streets and spread his message around I guess America, and go help a bunch of candidates try to get elected. And the GOP is just salivating over this. They're like, perfect. He's going to show up at my opponent's rally. Perfect. How many times can we have him there? That's great. And so you can see now he's excited about this, but he's a little bit confused, I think, because the John Lewis, basically that whole voting thing, it's all going to go down today after the filibuster rules aren't changed, right? Once the rules aren't changed, we already know that there's not going to be enough votes because they don't have a 60-plus majority in order to get it passed. So unless this happens, unless the filibuster is revised, then it's dead. So that's what she's talking about there, Joe. Okay, so let's take a listen and make the argument from Chuck Schumer's perspective. Here's Chuck Schumer. He's going to be ranting and raving about all the Republicans and all the governors out there who are modifying the election rules. He's saying going to make it harder for you to vote. And so here's, what's happening. We've talked a lot about voting stuff here on this channel a lot. And we've talked about the differing arguments between voter integrity and voter access and voter equity versus, voter suppression versus voter integrity. There's all sorts of different ways that you can splice it. I made a slide about it. I can't recall it right now. But there's a big debate that's happening. And you're going to see what we talk about here a lot, emotive conjugations, right? Or Russell's conjugation, the idea that you can take the same issue and emotionalize it to serve your arguments. And Chuck Schumer's going to do it. And then we're going to hear from Mitch McConnell, who's going to do it. They're talking about the same thing. But here it is. Here's Chuck Schumer.
And amazingly enough, my colleagues, none of them are here to hear it, our Republican colleagues don't even acknowledge that we have a crisis. Leader McConnell even claimed, quote, states are not engaged in trying to suppress voters whatsoever. I would ask the Republican leader, if there's no effort to suppress the vote, why have 19 states passed 33 new laws making it harder for Americans to participate in our elections?
Voter
integrity. If there's no effort to suppress the vote, why are states from Texas to Montana restricting the number and hours of polling places?
Voter integrity.
Why have states like Florida and Texas made it harder to register to vote?
Voter integrity.
Is that not suppressing the vote?
It's voter integrity. Yeah.
Why are states like Iowa cutting down on the number of days you can vote early? Is that not suppressing the vote? And if there's no effort to suppress the vote, why have states like Georgia made it a crime for volunteers to give food and water to voters standing in line at the polls?
Well, he's not a dummy. He knows why.
Leader McConnell, once again, quote, states are not engaging in trying to suppress voters whatsoever. Just as Donald Trump has his big lie, Leader McConnell now has his.
Right. So that's what Chuck Schumer posted over on his Twitter account. And you can see the argument, right? The Republicans are going to respond and they say it's not voter suppression, okay? Asking people to show their ID at a proper time, place, and location is just conducting an election, right? That's how these things have to be conducted. And so Chuck Schumer, the question, of course, would be, why are you trying to water down American democracy? Why do you want anybody to be able to go vote 2, 3, 4 times, whenever they want, however they want, incentivized however they want, people picking up ballots, exploiting senior citizens? You want people who are not citizens to be participating in the American democracy and the experiment. So you can have a lot of the reverse arguments going the opposite way if you want to sort of say we're more interested in integrity, not, but they reframe that, right? It's not integrity, it's suppression, because you're making it a little bit more difficult. So it's just putting however you want to frame it, they do, and they're politicians, they do that. But Mitch McConnell's actually going a little bit a level deeper, right? The Democrats are sort of, they're wanting to federalize these elections. But Mitch McConnell is saying we're really talking about preserving the Senate rules. We shouldn't just be changing the rules so that the Democrats can now federalize the elections, just squeak this one through while they have this majority, basically further cementing their power indefinitely into the future. And Mitch McConnell calls this the biggest day in the Senate. Now, Cocaine Mitch, according to his primary opponent some time ago, has a lot of fire in his belly from time to time. This is about as fiery as I've ever seen him, which is saying a lot for the turtle. Here he is.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's pretty safe to say this is the biggest day in the history of the Senate.
Whoa!
Because we're dealing with the Senate as an institution. These radicals on the other side, in order to get their own way, are prepared to break the United States Senate.
Break it.
By taking steps, almost all of them decried as recently as a couple of years ago.
2017.
Fortunately, there are 2 members of the Democratic Conference who believe in the institution, understand that in the very near future the shoe might be on the other foot, and are prepared to prevent this destructive move. I congratulate both of them for their courage
Man.
in preserving the institution and bearing in mind that the shoe, as I said earlier, will soon be on the other foot.
Oh!
And you need to take a long view of the role of the Senate, going back to the very beginnings of the country, as a place where things were slowed down, thought over, stopped altogether if they couldn't enjoy bipartisan support.
McConnell is pissed right
or
now.
many times bringing enough people together to go over the 60 vote threshold and make bipartisan progress for the country.
Woo! Man, that is Cocaine Mitch there. Extra cocaine-y today. And that's I'm not joking, folks. He means war right now. If you normally listen to Mitch McConnell, he's like at a level that was like a level 11 for Mitch McConnell. All right. It's typically sort of like a slow-moving slug across the floor of the Senate. But he's very effective. I mean, for the Republicans, he gets it done. But he was fired up right there. You better think about this long and hard there, Democrats, if you think about changing the institution of the Senate. Don't make me come out here. So, of course, a lot of shenanigans out there on the Senate floor. Even Manchin came out and had a sign. He says that the United States Senate never been able to end debate with a simple majority. Right. So everybody knows, even the Democrats know what they're trying to do. Everybody knows. But thankfully, we have a couple of Democratic senators who are not falling in line. Kyrsten Sinema, Arizona, shout out. All right, let's take a look at Joe Biden now. So he gets asked about this, voting rights, upcoming election. Hey, Joe, you've been screaming and shouting about how you got the most votes in history and about how it was the most safe and secure election ever and how no judge in the history of America ever thought anything went wrong and blah, blah, blah. Now you're standing and shouting and screaming from the rooftops that something is dramatically broken with our election system, which is why the feds got to take it over. So which is it there, Joe Biden? And in addition to that, we do have an election coming up. So is it your position that the election system is so broken that the current upcoming elections are going to be jeopardized unless we pass your little bill? Are you saying that this election is going to be invalid? It's going to be held hostage under your administration unless we pass this John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Is that what you're saying, Joe? Here's what he says.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking of voting rights legislation, if this isn't passed, do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on
Depends
whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election.
What?
And it's one thing, look, maybe
Okay.
I'm just being too much of an optimist. Remember how we thought not that many people were going to show up to vote in the middle of a pandemic? We had the highest voter turnout in the history of the United States of America.
Yes, you keep saying that. Yes.
Well, I think if, in fact, no matter how hard they make it for minorities to vote, I think you're going to see them willing to stand in line and defy the attempt to keep them from being able to vote.
Making it hard, is that fact in evidence? Are there bills that say we're going to make it more difficult for people of certain demographics to vote? Is that happening anywhere in this country? Here's Joe Biden with that big lie.
I think you're going to see the people we're trying to keep from being able to show up, showing up and making the sacrifice that needs to be made in order to change the law back to what it should be. But it's going to be difficult. I make no bones about that. It's going to be difficult. But we're not there yet. We've not run out of options yet, and we'll see how this moves.
And on Omicron and education, teachers are in revolt in so many places.
Okay, so she goes into a different question. So we didn't get a very clear answer on that. Remember when Donald Trump came out in 2020 and they said, Mr. President, if you lose the election, are you going to accept the results of the election, sir? What do you say? And he would say, well, we're going to have to wait and find out and see. He said that many times. And remember the lunatics everywhere, all over, tripping themselves all over themselves on CNN and MSNBC elsewhere? This guy's a dictator. This guy's a monster. He's seizing control of the American democracy. We have to unify and oust this orange Cheeto. Remember that? Every day, nonstop. It was ridiculous, like a broken record. He gives the same exact answer. And it was even less coherent than anything Trump has ever said, because he said something about we have to convince the American people that the reason they're changing the vote is for something. And then he said, look, maybe I'm an optimist. So he didn't finish that thought and then went into another thought. Don't know what he's talking about. So, okay. So my question is, of course, when is Facebook going to ban him? And when is YouTube going to throw him off the platform for misinformation, for saying that he doesn't trust the elections? We'll have to wait and see. Don't hold your breath on that. So now Joe Biden is we're getting nearer the end of a lot of the questions. Before we jump and change topics, let's take a look at a couple super chats that just came in because they are voting related. John says, we're in Canada. It's incredibly difficult to get a pretty down the line view of what's going on over there via the media right now. It's odd that any American, RRD or D, would vote out Trump. He's rough around the edges, but very effective. John, that's an astute observation there from a Canadian. not to say that pejorative. I mean to say that as somebody who's not from the United States. I think I agree with that largely. I mean, it's, Trump was rough around the edges is an excellent way to put it. But man, I mean, take a look at his version of America versus Joe Biden's version of America. Just compare and contrast the policies. Just compare and contrast the COVID deaths if you'd like to. Pretty simple, right? On the metrics, you can compare them. It's two different countries dramatically, two different levels of energy, two different international relations, right? And you may say Trump's a difficult guy or whatever you have to say about him. But it was a whole different country, and the public is responding to it. And I think Joe is going to continue to crash into the ground. So it's a good question. I think it's a beautiful summation, and thank you for that nice support there. Jordan Heck also says, I'm sorry, as a citizen of Canada, but we have to show ID or proof of residence before voting. Are we racist? And the answer, according to American liberals, is yes, you are. You are a racist person for showing somebody for demanding that you show them where you live, because that's very difficult. All right, look, and I'm not making this up, okay? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we've played the clips on this show multiple times. I can't remember which one of them is more racist or not, but both of them at one point or another said that minority people in certain rural areas can't go out and fill out a form or find a fax machine or submit their voter registration to get an ID or to get a registration card or to get literally an ID card. All of that is too much of a burden for them to comply with. I'm not saying that. They said that. We've played the clips on here multiple times. I didn't pull them for today. But yeah, they're saying that if you make them do that, that's too racist because these people apparently can't figure out how to use the internet or something like that. It is the most racist and offensive thing I have ever heard come out of their mouths. I can't even believe they're still in office. Honestly, they just get a pass for that stupid language, man. It's so offensive. But all right. So two great super chats over from YouTube. Let's carry on. Joe Biden now is getting testy. So the press conference continues on. You can see over from C-SPAN. He's here now, and this reporter is going to ask him about, I forget what it was, but he gets testy. Let's listen.
Assuming that the attempt fails today.
And then one more, sir. You campaigned and you ran on a return to civility, and I know that you dispute the characterization that you called folks who would oppose those voting bills as being Bull Connor or George Wallace, but you said that they would be sort of in the same camp.
No, I didn't say that. Look what I said. Go back and read what I said.
Oh.
And tell me if you think I called anyone who voted on the side of the position taken by Bull Connor that they were Bull Connor. And that is an interesting reading of English. I assume you got into journalism because you like to write.
Okay, so he starts doing that kind of cranky old man thing, but he asks that journalist to now fact check him on this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fact check you there, Joe. Let's take a listen to what you said.
Defend the right to vote, our democracy against all enemies, foreign
and, yes, domestic. At consequential moments in history, they present a choice. Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace? Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? This is the moment to decide, to defend our elections, to defend our democracy.
He's literally talking about the current sitting senators. This is the time to decide. Who is he talking about? They're the ones who vote. He's demanding they vote on this. And they weren't happy about that. So the journalist asks him a nice question. He gets snippy with him, and it was a very reasonable question to ask. So that was Joe Biden talking all about domestic issues during his press conference today. And he's going to continue to sort of melt like a snowman into the podium. I don't know that I actually have a full, what I wanted to do is sort of this compare and contrast of like a before and after clip. I'm not going to have time to find it, I don't think. But here's where we're going to go next. We've got Joe Biden, who is going to transition. Press conference from Joe Biden talking about the Ukraine now. Now, I shouldn't say that. It's Ukraine. I was saying a lot the Ukraine yesterday. That's inappropriate. Joe Biden is talking about Ukraine and Russia, and we've got clips from him now. I believe this is it. Okay, Joe Biden press conference talking about the situation in Crimea and Russia.
If they invade, they're going to pay. Their banks will not be able to deal in dollars.
Banks
so there's a lot's going to happen. But here's the thing. My conversation with Putin, and we've been, how can we say it? We have no problem understanding one another. He has no problem understanding me, nor me him. And the direct conversations were, I pointed out, I said, you've occupied before other countries, but the price has been extremely high. How long? You can go in and over time, at great loss and economic loss, go in and occupy Ukraine. But how many years? 1, 3, 5, 10? What is that going to take? What toll does that take? It's real. It's consequential. So this is not all just a cakewalk for Russia. Militarily, they have overwhelming superiority as it relates to Ukraine. But they'll pay a stiff price immediately, near term, medium term, and long term if they do it.
Okay, so, I was getting deja vu when I was listening back to Joe Biden. Now, I didn't pull the clips, but do you remember a lot of these same clips that he was telling us back during the Afghanistan withdrawal? Remember all of those clips? In no situation will there be anybody who's being helicoptered out of the embassy. Okay, not going to happen. Remember, he said the Afghanistan army have 300,000 troops. Remember? And so he's doing that same routine again, getting out here in front of everybody, talking like he knows about international diplomacy. Kind of botched that last time. So I think people are losing faith in a little bit in this administration. Now, let's get up to speed on what's going on with this Russia-Ukraine situation. AP is catching us up to speed. We've got Vladimir Isenchenkov, who's the perfect journalist for this story. Says from Moscow, Russia is sending an unspecified number of troops for the country's Far East Belarus for major war games. Russia sending troops in for war games. Deployment that's going to further beef up the military presence near Ukraine amid Western fears. So, quick refresher on this puppy. Yesterday, the United States sent over, drop my clicker. Drop my clicker. All right. So yesterday we sent over Antony Blinken from the State Department to go over there and to try to start to sort of, settle things down over there. Wake up this morning, Russia had sent over an entire war games military presence. So that sounds fun. Amid the soaring tensions, White House warned that Russia could attack its neighbor, quote, at any point, while the UK delivered a batch of anti-tank weapons over to the Ukraine. And the English, actually, the UK, are flying planes like round the clock, just dropping off equipment over there. Saw a very interesting Twitter post, somebody showing a GIF of that happening, or GIF. Ukrainian officials have warned that Russia could launch an attack from several directions, including from its ally in Belarus, and the U.S. again stretched its concern on Tuesday. Jen Psaki called it an extremely dangerous situation. Now, we have been following the Ukraine, Russia, Crimea situation for a long time, right? It's been one of those areas of the world where there's been a lot of back and forth for basically as long as I've been alive. Same situation, sort of in the Middle East and other parts of the world. And so I wanted to take a look at what the U.S. policy was related to this part of the world. And actually, the Congressional Service gives us a summary of this. And they published this back during the last year of October 5th, 2021. And so this is going to be, sort of during the Biden administration. This is the U.S. government posture about this entire situation. And they're going to give us a little bit of background on this, and then we're going to take a look a little bit further in depth. So it tells us that Ukraine has been governed by President Zelensky, who we're going to take a look about a little bit further in, says that he's attempted to reinvigorate conflict resolution process. Russia appears no closer to implementing a permanent ceasefire or withdrawing its military forces from Ukraine. The U.S. supports Ukraine's sovereignty, okay, so this is the official policy, territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, and promotes the implementation of domestic reforms. Ukraine independent 1991, especially after Russia's 2014 invasion, and we're going to learn a little bit more about, why Russia wants this area, why it's so important to them, briefly. Ukraine been a leading recipient of U.S. foreign military aid. State Department sent over $418 million a year on average, plus a total of more than $350 million in humanitarian aid since 2014. So a lot of those U.S. dollars going over there. U.S. has provided more than $2.5 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. Since 2014, many members of Congress on a bipartisan basis have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A lot of different acts and sort of things that they're referring to. So, of course, we know that. Now, here is why there's a conflict. And so you can see we've got Russia over here in the gray, and Ukraine is, of course, in white. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it across on the screen here, but you can see Crimea occupied by Russia sort of in this yellow highlight. And here, this other area, non-government controlled areas, sort of on the borders between Russia and Ukraine. So you can kind of see those two areas that I highlighted there. And so the question that I had is, where did all this start? Where did all this come from? It says many observers believe that all of the post-Soviet states, Ukraine's independence has been the most difficult for the Russians to accept. Russians not happy with it. Many Russians traditionally considered much of Ukraine to be a historical province of Russia and Ukrainians to be close ethnic brethren. In July 2021, Vladimir Putin published an essay expanding upon claims he has made before regarding Ukraine's ties to Russia, saying that they are one people, which is interesting, right? Kind of the same thing that we see with the Chinese and the great nation of Taiwan, independent of China. China says that's not true, which is ridiculous because it is an independent nation. Same type of thing happening here. We can see that most Ukrainians can speak Russian, whether it's primary or secondary. In Ukraine's last national census, 17% are ethnic Russians. In Soviet times, Eastern Ukraine became home to heavy industrial force and defense production sector, close economic ties to Russia. Okay, and you can see, right, this is kind of a beautiful piece of geography, right? In the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, and you can see why they would, might want all of those ports and land, really. You can see that this is what it looks like. So, when you're hearing from Biden and we're going to hear from Blinken and they're talking about, the situation on the ground, this is a graphic over from the Daily Mail, so I don't, take it for what it's worth, but you can see sort of looks like they're surrounding them on all areas, right? In Belarus, Russia, we've got a number of different battalions and all different parts over, surrounding Ukraine. Eddie Oliver says, Rob, it's pronounced Belarus. Did I say that? Did I say that in here? Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Ukraine. We're talking about the United States, Russia. Here's Joe Biden now addressing it today. Now, this is a long clip, and I think I'm just going to let this one play for a minute. Let's see how long we can take it.
David Sanger, New York Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to follow up on your answer there about Russia and Ukraine. When you were in Geneva in June, you said to us about President Putin, I think the last thing he wants now is a Cold War. Now, since then, of course, you've seen him gather these troops, 100,000 troops around Ukraine. Your Secretary of State said today he thought he could invade it at any moment. You've seen the cyber attacks. And you've seen the demand that he have a sphere of influence in which you would withdraw all American troops and nuclear weapons from what used to be the Soviet bloc. So I'm wondering if you still think that the last thing he wants is a Cold War. And has your view of him changed in the past few months? And if it has, and he does invade, would your posture be to really move back to the kind of containment policy that you saw so often when you were still in the Senate?
The answer is that I think he still does not want any full-blown war, number one.
Okay.
Number two,
all right.
Do I think he'll test the West, test the United States and NATO as significantly as he can? Yes, I think he will. But I think he'll pay a serious and dear price for it.
What is
that
it?
He doesn't think now will cost him what it's going to cost him. And I think he'll regret having done it.
Yikes.
Now, whether or not, I think that...
Yikes. Wait, real quick, doesn't that sound like it's a foregone conclusion? Doesn't it sound like he thinks he knows he's coming? Like, I think he's going to regret having done it. Like, it's going to happen, and we're going to have to do something about it. He's almost talking fatalistically, like it's a foregone conclusion. It's coming. And it's going to be a lot worse than he thought previously, and he's not ready for it. So it's really hard to tell with Joe, because you can't tell if he's just meandering off or if this is like actionable intelligence. Here he continues.
How can I say this in a public forum? I think that he is dealing with what I believe he thinks is the most tragic thing that's happened to Mother Russia, in that the Berlin Wall came down, the empire has been lost, the near abroad is gone, etc. The Soviet Union has been split. But think about what he has. He has 8 time zones, a burning tundra that will not freeze again naturally, a situation where he has a lot of oil and gas, but he is trying to find his place in the world between China and the West. And so I'm not so sure that he has David, I'm not so sure he has is certain what he's going to do. My guess is he will move in. He has to do something. And by the way, I've indicated to him the 2 things he said to me that he wants guarantees on. One is Ukraine will never be part of NATO. And 2, that NATO or there will not be strategic weapons stationed in Ukraine. Well, we can work out something on the second piece, pretending what he does along the Russian line as well, the Russian border in the European area of Russia. On the first piece, we have a number of treaties internationally and in Europe that suggest that you get to choose who you want to be with. But the likelihood that Ukraine is going to join NATO in the near term is not very likely, based on much more work they have to do in terms of democracy and a few other things going on there, and whether or not the major allies in the West would vote to bring Ukraine in right now. So there's room to work if he wants to do that. But I think, as usual, he's going to... Well, I probably shouldn't go any further.
Yeah.
I think it will hurt him badly.
Okay, there you go.
Like you were...
Okay, so a big, long, very drawn-out, painful answer, right? And kind of meandering through, some of the more deep, like kind of philosophical reasons. He calls Russia Mother Russia, and, the collapse of their empire, and stuff that you really don't have to think too much about. But when you do get into the specifics of this, you know, the journalist asks him very pointed questions. Hey, they're doing this, this, and this, and this, and this. You're saying that they don't want a Cold War. Seems like they're gearing up for one. What's your response to that? He goes, you know, the empire's failed and blah, blah, blah. But he does say, well, it's probably likely that they will invade. And then he says they're going to have to do something, aren't they? And they're trying to find their place. And yeah, we know. Yeah, I guess, Joe, that's the whole point that we're asking you. Do you know that? And what is your response to all of that? And so the next clip that we have is sort of a little bit different. You know, he told us that he wants hard penalties if there are incursions by Russia into Ukraine. And now he's going to say, you know, but it's got to be a big one. If it's a minor incursion, that's not that big of a deal.
So I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera.
Good question there. So, Joe, minor incursions, I don't know. Is that what counts as a minor incursion, as a major incursion? I don't know. It's hard to tell. John says, actionable intelligence should be the title of your book, Rob. It's a good title. I'm sure somebody else has already taken that. Says, if you had to proffer a thought, how do you think the U.S. should deal with the situation? Well, my first question, of course, is, you know, why should the U.S. deal with the situation? That's always my first question, right? Why should the U.S. deal with this situation? Are there interests of the U.S. over there? And if there are, then I think we should be talking about them. What are those interests? How does sending American resources and American money and blood and sweat and the infantrymen over from Florida to Ukraine, how does that serve American interests? And if somebody can explain that to me real well, then maybe I'll be a little bit more up to speed and have some more thoughts on what to do about it. But I get tired of the United States sort of playing the world police, going around and trying to settle everybody's affairs for them. That's not our role. We're not good at it. We spent 25 years doing that in Afghanistan, and look what we got for it. So when we start to hear people banging the drums of war, starting to see everybody in the media, all of the administration pivoting hard to the Ukraine-Russia collusion issue, whatever's going on over there, it makes me nervous because it feels like they're trying to pitch us a new war that I'm not particularly interested in being in for another 25 years. So that's my take on it. My first question, actionable, is what are we going to get out of it? What's the return on investment of American blood, sweat, and resources and efforts? Because I don't know what it is. And so that's my thought. So Anthony Blinken is here, and he's now going to be sharing his perspective with the embassy. Embassy is now, of course, bracing themselves. And recall, right, the people in this embassy, they're like, well, thank God that we've got a competent United States government that's going to take care of us, just like they did in Afghanistan. What? Oh, yeah. That was kind of a disaster. 13 service members dead as a result of their incompetence. So now you can see Anthony Blinken goes over there and is addressing everybody in the embassy, telling them that they are appreciated for their work. Let's see what he says.
I can imagine that this period is especially difficult, stressful, and maybe even scary for all of you. And I just want you to know that we're thinking of you. We have your backs as you've had ours for so many years. And we're with you, we're with your families, communities, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for your service to and with us. So I also want you to know that your colleagues around the world are thinking of you, looking at what's going on here, and most important, we as a department in Washington are here for you, very, very focused on the well-being, the safety, the security of our community here, including your families. But I also know that this is what you're all here to do. This is what you trained to do. This is what you spent your careers doing. And I am extremely confident that based on the great work you've already done, we will be up to this challenge, whatever it is, in the days and weeks ahead. With that, let me simply say again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that like final speech before, you know, that scene in the movie when everything goes bad. It's like, go out there and tell them everything's going to be fine. Yeah, but they're all like going into the alien battle zone. Yeah, but they're going to be all right, though. It's like Super Troopers. Oh, we're going to go get them. Or what's the movie? Battleship, Super Galactic, Super, the ones with the bugs where they're driving around and they all get killed. It's kind of like that. And so, I'm hopeful that, of course, that doesn't happen, but you take a look at the administration's track record and you can't help but wonder if those embassy employees are getting a little bit antsy in the pantsy. I think that they might. Here is what Anthony Blinken posted earlier today. Said, I updated Ukrainian President Zelensky today on our engagements with Russia last week and stressed there'll be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Okay. There will be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. All right. It says, I applaud Ukraine's commitment to a peaceful resolution and urge Russia to pursue diplomacy as the only way forward. And so we see that they actually met. So Blinken provides an update from Kiev. Ukraine says, we will continue our relentless diplomatic efforts to prevent renewed aggression and to promote dialogue and peace. At the same time, we continue to bolster Ukraine's ability to defend itself. And so I've got a little bit of this. Let's listen in.
Let me just begin by why I'm here in Kiev today. First and foremost, it is to reaffirm the United States' unwavering support for Ukraine at a time when its security, its prosperity, its democracy, its fundamental right to exist as a sovereign, independent nation are facing an unprecedented challenge from Russia. The Ukrainian people are no strangers to conflict. Since Ukrainians took to the Maidan 8 years ago to defend their choice for a democratic and European future, Russia has used every strategy in its playbook to try to undermine the will of the Ukrainian people. Since 2014, Moscow manufactured a crisis and invaded Ukraine's territory in Crimea, which it occupies to this day. Moscow orchestrated a war in eastern Ukraine, which it continues to fuel using proxy forces that it leads, trains, equips, and finances. Moscow has systematically sought to weaken Ukraine's democratic institutions, as well as to divide Ukrainian society, using everything from election interference to disinformation to cyber attack.
Yeah, so where were they when Hong Kong went down? Yeah, they're so interested in, democratic processes and things like that. Didn't say much about Hong Kong, did they? Right? And my point here is a lot of this stuff is sort of, it's selective, right? And anytime that you pick and choose, what foreign entanglements you're going to get involved in, you start to, it feels like you're selling us something that we shouldn't really be involved in.
Russia is also
so that is Anthony Blinken. We have another clip here of President Biden. What's he talking about here? Let's listen in.
There is no way to get out of Afghanistan after 20 years easily.
Oh, yeah.
Not possible, no matter when you did it. And I make no apologies for what I did. I have a great concern for the women and men who were blown up on the line at the airport by a terrorist attack against them.
Great concern.
But the military will acknowledge, and I think you will, who know a lot about foreign policy, that had we stayed and I had not pulled those troops out, we would be asked to put somewhere between 20 and 50,000 more troops back in.
So not really concerned about Afghanistan, not really, yes, sorry about those 13 service members, but, it could have been a lot worse. And so, it's hard to have a lot of faith in the administration that just went through Afghanistan, relying on them to do a better job the second go round in Ukraine. So strange things. Now, we've got a couple highlights of just leftovers, just random clips from, of course, the Joe Biden press conference, not related to much of anything other than, we've got the Joe Biden whisper. Can't do a show without the Joe Biden whisper.
Very few schools are closing. Over 95% are still open.
All right, one more time. Let's do the whisper one more time.
Very few schools are closing. Over 95% are still open.
All right, so in case you missed it, he whispered it for you twice. Now, he did make a very good point on the show today. He said, hey, what the hell are the Republicans for? What do they do out there? I don't know. It's a good question. Joe asks it.
Think about this. What are Republicans for?
I don't know.
What are they for?
The same thing you're for,
Name
Joe.
me one thing they're for. And so
basically
the
what
problem here is that I think what I have to do in the change in tactic, if you will, I have to make clear to the American people what we are for. We've passed a lot. We passed a lot of things that people don't even understand what's all that's in it, understandably.
Yeah, so what are the Republicans for? What are you for? Nobody really knows what they're for anymore, Joe. Everybody just wants to ransack the Treasury when it's their turn. It's your party's turn, and so you can just go hog wild. But I mean, you know, he's not wrong about that. You know, what are the Republicans really fighting for? Are they fighting for the J6ers? No, not at all. Right? They're actually going the opposite direction on many of them. How about the border? Anybody screaming out about the border? Nope, nothing going on with the border there. Many of them bent over backwards on lockdowns and masks and jabs. So I don't really, I agree with them. I don't really know what they're for as a party, but we are talking now politics. And so we get Steve Doocy, of course, who asks Joe Biden about this. Says, hey, Joe, kind of a weird question, but he says, why are you taking the country so left? Here's what that sounds like.
None of them make a lot of sense to me, but
well, let's try.
Fire away. Come on.
A new year. Why are you trying so hard in your first year to pull the country so far to the left?
So he starts laughing.
I'm not. I don't know what you consider to be too far to the left. If in fact we're talking about making sure that we had the money for COVID, making sure we had the money to put together the bipartisan infrastructure, making sure we were able to provide for those things that, in fact, would significantly reduce the burden on working class people, but make them, they have to continue to work hard. I don't know how that is pulling it to the left. If you may recall,
here's voice.
You guys have been trying to convince me that I am Bernie Sanders. I'm not. I like him, but I'm not Bernie Sanders. I'm not a socialist. I'm a mainstream Democrat, and I have been. And mainstream Democrats have overrun me. If you notice, the 48 of the 50 Democrats supported me in the Senate on virtually everything I've asked. Yes, sir.
I wanted to clarify.
All right, so we get that other question. And then this is a question, I actually haven't listened to this one yet. I just downloaded it before we hopped on here. So I think somebody asked him about his cognitive decline. It's going to be an interesting question. And so this is a little bit of a different angle. You can see Joe slowly starts to like drop like molasses. At one point, I don't know if I have a clip, he kind of comes off to the left there to the side, but let's listen here on this one.
Yes.
Thank you very much for this honor. James Rosen with Newsmax.
Newsmax.
I'd like to raise a delicate subject, but with utmost respect for your life accomplishments and the high office you hold. A poll released this morning by Politico Morning Consult found 49% of registered voters disagreeing with the statement, Joe Biden is mentally fit. Not even a majority of Democrats who responded strongly affirmed that statement.
Well, I'll let you all make the judgment whether they're correct.
Well, so the question I have for you, sir, if you'd let me finish, is why do you suppose such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? Thank you.
I have no idea. Yes, sir.
Whoa. No idea. Well, okay. A lot of other people have some ideas there. And so that's Joe Biden, the press conference. Honestly, folks, I could have clipped the whole stinking thing because there was so much to talk about there. But let's change gears and see what you have to say about this over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. I know there's questions coming in hot. Let's see what we've got. We've got TOS Forever says, wow, what a difference from last year. More focus, stayed closer to the topic. Now we are hearing about the voting changes they want are in how they are counted. Do you think that is what the bill really reads? Sure would like to read a posting of it. So, you know, I haven't read the actual bill that they're trying to pass, but I think basically what they're trying to do is set the standards on how voting should happen in a way that supports their voting efforts, right? That would be my opinion on it, and I'm sure that theirs would be different, but that is my thought on it. But I have not read the formal bill. Bumma Lickett says, every American president, in my opinion, loves America, no question about it. It's just that some presidents show it differently because it's very hard to fake your intentions to do good and care about our nation and create policies, new laws that contradict your intentions to be helpful, right? Maybe the problem is the foresight and the outcome of what America he envisions it to be. But I still wish for America to have a better president than Joe Biden. I'm with you on that, Bumma Lickett. We'll get one soon. You know, every now and then you get a rotten egg. So Speech Unleashed says it's so obvious that these questions, even the tough ones, were submitted to the Biden administration ahead of time. He's constantly looking down at his note cards to read the answer that was written ahead of time for him. Trump never needed to do that. Trump could answer questions about anything to anyone, anytime without needing to look anywhere else than that person's eye. Biden is such a joke. Also, Build Back Better is actually Build Back BS. And we talked about the Build Back Better stuff over on, I think it was on Monday it was, when we talked about the World Economic Forum, right? It's really not even Joe Biden's plan. It's the World Economic Forum's plan. They are dictating what independent nation states, or supposedly independent nation states, are doing with their governance. But yeah, it was different. Now, Joe Biden did go off script, I think, right? He, like, towards the end there, he said, I got another 20 minutes or so. And like, I don't think that Rosen, that Newsweek question, like that couldn't have been approved, right? Sir, why do you have dementia? Can you answer that for us? He says, I don't. Next question, right? TOS Forever says, Rob, so nice to watch your live stream in the Locals app. Thank you for your excellent work and time you spend with the American people and those abroad. Yeah, we had a good stream this morning. It was fun. So we do some show prep often before the show, talk about some of these issues. And, don't have to be on YouTube. It's good. John and Heather Halgren says, the Democrats are distancing themselves from Joe in an attempt to save the midterms. They must know that simply letting him talk will result in a serious gaffe and ultimately, quote, retiring him. It's going to seem like a humanitarian thing to do. I'm also assuming whoever wrote that Winter of Death Christmas card tweet has been fired. Yeah, the Winter of Death one, yeah. That was a line, man. Remember Joe Biden came out there? Yeah, unless you're jabbed up, you're going to be a person who's enjoying Christmas in the winter of death. Vote for me, Joe Biden. America's getting better. Things are going to get better. Good to see you, John and Heather. Hope you join us on Saturday. Speech Unleashed says, even in the black population with traditionally votes for Dems, there are overwhelmingly for strict voter regulations, including requiring a valid ID to vote by person and in mail. This is why Biden wants to let illegal immigrants into the U.S. They want lacking voter laws. He needs a new voter base to rely on since they can no longer exploit that population. Well, I've always said that I think the demographics or the sort of the strategy of the Democrats is to cobble together a bunch of interest groups, right? I mean, I think they even acknowledge that they need to go and win all of the different sort of niche groups, whereas Republicans are sort of they're kind of doing the same thing, but different, right? It's sort of different categories. All right, we've got Sergeant Bob's here, says, simple idea from economist Mark Armstrong, says, require a social security number to vote, eliminate illegals, also cross-check of the address using the social security address could be made, no match, vote, then invalid. So no illegal votes because you're cross-referencing it. Now, the Democrats would say that that's a racist policy, that what you're doing is now disenfranchising people, right? They're coming to vote. You're cross-referencing it. Their data is not in alignment. They don't get to vote. You just disenfranchise somebody. And so they would say that the consequences of these policies sort of improperly bias against certain demographics for whatever reason, right? That's the argument. But good to see you, Sergeant. We're talking to Sergeant Bob on Saturday, too. Biden is a racist, says Joe Biden totally cares about minorities when his 1994 crime bill threw most people of minority status into prison. Also, remember, Joe did not want African Americans in an education system around his children, stating it's going to be a racial and that, yeah, he said a lot of bad things. Joe Biden said a lot of bad things in 94. Don't need to repeat them here. Kenny 1B says, I went to Walgreens today to get an at-home COVID test. Guess what? Shelves were empty. There weren't any. Go figure. Well, good news is you can go onto their website and they'll ship one to you in 7 to 12 days. Good luck. Joe Biden says, Russia, please don't invade Ukraine. I need Burisma to pay my son $50,000 a month. Yeah, that's true. He does. Deja vu. Hungary in 1957. We got to read up on my history on that. Date, time, and location. On YouTube, John said, Rob, you're a smart guy. Great answer. Thank you. Well, thanks, John. It was a good question. Thanks for that good question. And, I think that's kind of how I generally feel about most foreign policy issues. So it's a good question. Kifa212 with a donation and another question says, USA signed a treaty in 1994. Ukraine surrendered its nukes for protection. U.S. did nada. Russia invaded Crimea, and Ukraine should have kept the nukes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably... Yeah, there's a lot of history there. So the Soviet Union fell apart. You have all these satellite states. Soviet Union had thousands of nukes. All these satellite states get them. The U.S. wants to gobble it up. So we've got a lot of very complex issues here. And so maybe the U.S. does have a strong interest in making sure that nothing goes off over there, right? I don't know. This is why I'm not a foreign policy expert. But I can probably think, well, the Biden administration, I can tell you this. I've got a better track record than the Joe Biden administration on foreign policy. Okay? I do. So do all of you. We all do, right? I've never fought a global international war, but I've not ever lost one either. And Joe Biden has. So I think that we're doing pretty good. I'm happy with my record on that one. And Bill Meinhardt Jr. says, great chat. Love the show. Thanks, Bill. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for that. That's a nice support. I appreciate it very much. Bill Meinhardt Jr. We've got Sergeant Bob says, let us hope that the November elections bring an end to Biden's reign of incompetence. Kenny 1B says the U.S. coalition sent 177,000 soldiers to invade Iraq in 2003. Russia has at least 100,000 staged and ready to invade into Ukraine, which is smaller and less equipped to fight than Saddam Hussein's army. Well, that doesn't sound like good numbers there. Sounds like a problematic situation. No doubt about it. Grouchy old cat lady says Democrats like to call out Republicans for trying to suppress voting. The states they control in the Northeast make casting a ballot more difficult than anywhere else. Nonpartisan Center for Election Innovation and Research, Delaware, Connecticut, New York, rank in the bottom third of states in their access to early mail-in balloting. From Grouchy old cat lady. Interesting. Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about the election before the election, but YouTube doesn't want you to do that anymore. Vientikis says, hey, how about them white helmets? Don't they have swastikas on their uniforms? From Vientikis Prime. Sergeant Bob says, Biden's word full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, right? And we saw that already. Like, we've seen this movie before. We're on season 2 of this foreign policy debacle. Obi-Wan Kenobi says, Rob, will someone please tell the January 6th committee that Ray Epps is not the insurrectionist they're looking for? I think they've already been told. They know that. They're going to interview him, and he's going to say to them, they're going to say, Ray Epps, we're looking for an insurrectionist. Is that you? And he's going to say, I'm not the insurrectionist you're looking for. And Liz Cheney's going to say, oh, yeah, I forgot. You're not the insurrection that we're looking for. He's going to say, Donald Trump's the insurrectionist you're looking for. She's going to say, oh, yeah, Donald Trump. They're probably going to indict him. Kenny 1B says, U.S. sent 100,000 troops to Kuwait in preparation for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Same number Russian has amassed on the border. Already read that one. We have, Rob, a little off topic, but what are your thoughts on bow ties in the legal profession? How a prospective client finds the attorney wearing one trustworthy? It's beyond me. Oh my gosh, C. Rose, this is a prickly question out there, buddy boy. It's a complex issue. It's very complex. Now, myself personally don't own any bow ties or wear any bow ties, but I know some attorneys that I respect that do wear them. And so I'm a little bit hesitant. And maybe they know something that I don't know. Maybe if you wear a bow tie, you just automatically get acquittals or something. I don't know. So I'm not sure I'm qualified to opine on that one. But they are questionable pieces of fashion. There's no doubt about it. You're right to be skeptical about it, C. Rose. Keep your eyes up. We have Sergeant Bob says, pre-World War II, France and England followed an appeasement plan with Hitler. How'd that work out? Putin is classic KGB, not too hard to figure out. Hitler used minor incursions as a build-up to a big war. History is a great teacher, if only students pay heed. Well, what they'll probably want to talk about is, what do they want to talk about with the Chinese? Human rights, something like that. And so, which is important, right? I'm not saying it's not important. Obviously it is, but do they care about that relative to their negotiations with the United States on this issue? Probably not. Speech Unleashed says Biden is pushing Russia to supply more oil so that our gas prices go down, but he thinks the U.S. is in a position to do anything of negative consequence to Russia by closing down the U.S.'s ability to be the oil independent. Biden has made the U.S. dependent on Russia for oil. Russia is in a much better position to put the squeeze on the U.S., especially with our current weak president, that the U.S. is to put the squeeze on Russia. That's from Speech Unleashed. Another good comment there. And a few more over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Yeah, I want to be anonymous says, can't be a weenie, Rob. We have to uphold our promises. We promised defense of the Ukraine, even when they are not in NATO. Hell, we can win a war if they don't tie our hand behind our backs. By the way, our military isn't looking pretty. I say let the chips fly. I'm tired of this power struggle being held over my head. I can't wait till our government fails and I can handle things my way without Gestapo consequences. Yeah, I want to be anonymous. Interesting comment. Yeah, but people have to fight those wars. And then people have to die. And it's not typically the people that have anything actually to gain from it, right? Sergeant Bob says, has Blinken looked at what happened under Hillary in Benghazi? The book is most revealing. Maybe somebody should send him a copy. Sergeant Bob says, mark my words, the Ukraine is a test. Cuba will be next. We need a JFK, not a Sleepy Joe. Probing, little probes. Major says, Ukraine makes a great helicopter and has a lot of industry. When I was in the army and Russia invaded the first time, I thought we were going to war, but we resigned our obligations. It has since emboldened our enemies that were competitors previously. All Obama did was give Ukraine Red Cross blankets instead of anti-tank weapons they needed. If we gave them weapons, then we wouldn't be in this position that we're in now. The time has come to wield the stick we've been talking about for so long. It is getting harder and harder to fight a war, and what resources do we have in the reserve to beef up our military? We spent all that money on BS and then left it in Afghanistan, while Lloyd Austin is double vax, boosted, face masked up, and face shielded up everywhere he goes. That's who's in charge of the Department of Defense. Kenny 1B says, it's way too late to prevent the Russian invasion. 3 months ago, U.S. could have supplied Ukraine with lots of weapons to make an invasion as costly as possible, and the Russian army hopes to deter an invasion. Now it's just a waiting game. Psychological war on the Ukrainian military, provoking desertion to thin the ranks before crossing the border. You think that's why they're talking such a big game over there at the White House? Because they don't want to be the administration that loses Ukraine? Curious. Sergeant Bob says, Biden whisper as bad as the Kamala cackle. There are two peas in a pod there, Sergeant Bob. Good observation. TOS Forever says, his asking about what a challenging party is for a tyrannical comment. Whisper to avoid yelling. Can you admit he does do a good acting job? Is he? I just think he's just kind of a strange guy, honestly. I just think he's kind of a weird dude. Like you know those people who sort of been in the tank too long, they sort of been in the profession too long and they're just like a little bit weird. You see this with a lot of doctors who are like really intelligent, who are often like saving people like in surgeries, or they're having to give people like life-ending diagnoses and things like that. They're just sort of like a little socially disconnected, a little bit awkward sometimes. I think if you have like 37 years in government, something else also happens to you. And that's what we're seeing, a lot with Joe Biden. And some of these weird things he does is quirky, weird behavior that, like if these politicians like acted this way with you at a dinner, like at a Thanksgiving dinner, you'd be like, this guy's freaking weird. He's not invited back here ever again. Who said he should come here and have dinner? No, get him out of here. And I don't know what that is, right? Maybe it's a all the sniffing of the hair. I don't know what it is. But Three Girlies says, so did we ever get a count on how many questions he took? I think it was determined 6 was an over-under. I thought about 10 maybe. Did anyone know how many questions Biden actually got through? Yeah, so I was more than 6. So I think we set the over-under at 6. And it would have been over that. I don't know how much over, maybe 8 or 10. I'm not sure how many questions he actually got through. But yeah, more than I thought, right? I was thinking closer to about 6 would be good. Because that's kind of what he has done historically. Now, he went on a lot longer than anybody anticipated. I mean, he just kept going and going and going. Thunder7 says, sorry, Rob, I couldn't listen to your show for the first hour as I can't listen to fake President Biden anymore. His lies and propaganda are beyond the pale. Just wanted to say that the NATO-Biden alliance pushing the Ukraine war narrative is to distract from failing policies here and the failures of the NWO who are collapsing faster than Pelosi's facelift. I posted a video about 9 ways we are winning. We, meaning the Patriots. I understand that, Thunder7. You know, and listen, I don't blame you for that. First hour of the show was a lot of Biden, which I can understand. So, you know, hope you're doing well and recovered from that. Wild Child says, people back in 2008 used the excuse that Ron Paul was too old. Now, after 14 years later, we've got Brandon, and Ron Paul is still conscious, cognizant, and as active as ever. It's too bad the U.S. didn't go a different direction back then, isn't it? Kenny1B says, Ukraine acquired the Soviet nuclear missiles but didn't have the codes to use them. They let the Russians retrieve the missiles, and the U.S. went in to destroy the silos that they were in. A little more meat on those bones there from Kenny1B. Thank you, Kenny. We have Bumma Lickett says, hey, hi again, Rob. My answer to the question you asked, why America have to be the world police? It's because we are seen as a great nation, as a first-class nation, and as a leader, we make sure the whole world is doing fine, living freely and peacefully. I don't like it, but I accepted it. Rather us be the leader of the world. Sacrifice and contribute more for the benefit of the world rather than China or Iran or Russia leading the world. I agree with that completely there, Bumma Lickett. I do. I think that it's true that America should be the leader and that we should make sure that our leadership is premised on very, very sacred values and principles that are immutable, that we don't bend over or roll over for, and we don't sort of bend the margins, change our principles around the margins in order to achieve power or, you know, global dominance or any of those things. Because if you do, and you grow into this big, powerful nation, but you sacrifice your underlying principles, is it worth it? Is it really? I don't think so. I don't. We have another one from Vladdy Putin says, does Biden realize that to saber rattle, you have to put the saber in the scabbard? You can't just shake the empty scabbard. You got to actually have a stick to wag at somebody else before it's meaningful. We have another one here. Hey, Rob, you're in-house Russian here. Just my 2 cents or 2 rubles. Putin's concern is that NATO has been creeping up closer and closer to the Russian border. 3 batches of new member states from the former Soviet bloc and or USSR sphere of influence have joined NATO on Putin's watch over the last 20 years. Not exactly the legacy that Putin wants for himself, especially since NATO isn't exactly pro-Russian. An analogy. Think Russia military bases in Cuba or Venezuela. US would be all over that. I think Putin is trying to get some sort of an agreement from the West to stop the expansion. But I also think he'll use the forces if he decides he needs to. Hope he doesn't. Man, such a good comment. Thank you for that, for our in-house Russian. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's a great analogy and a great reframe, right? We have had the Russians putting military bases in Cuba, and we flipped out about that, rightfully so. So you can understand, right, how another country might feel the same way if they're on the receiving end of that. Putin also says, Russia, Rob, my friend, I could take Ukraine down anytime. Nobody could stop me. Ukraine of no interest to me, but I won't allow NATO to place nuclear warheads there, which only takes 7 minutes to reach Moscow. It's a valid point, Putin. Vientika says, maybe all the people who Biden sniffed use a lot of hairspray and he's just suffering brain damage from the chemicals. That's a good point. He has been in the government for 37 years. That's a lot of hair intake for any person, especially Joe Biden. Because he likes to sniff away, doesn't he? And that, my friends, is it for us on the show today. I want to welcome some new people who joined up over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We're grateful for your support over there. We've got AZ Grayman Mr. Shields is in the house. Nora MC. We've got LG00, Angry Bear, Sassy Steph 2, Ratbags here, Ocean Lover, Free Mind. We've got Humphrey's Dad, Shiroz 31, Faradex, The Brink, Lena. We've got Piper, Todd Hupp, Suspicious Chick, Aussie Lawyer, Green Tutka, S. Baker, Gotcha Good, Jim 2008, and Falcone US NY. And we're also all meeting up on this Saturday, January 22nd, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be about 5 to 6:30 p.m. Arizona, Mountain, and it's going to be on Zoom. I'm going to post the registration link. We are going to be requiring logins, and we're going to have a waiting room and all that stuff, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to check in with our good friend here, basically a member of the show, Sergeant Bob. You can see he wrote this book, Cop Talk. We're going to talk for a little bit about cop stuff and defense attorney stuff. We'll talk for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll sort of see if that kind of keys off a conversation with everybody else who, of course, as I hope will be there. And I hope that's you, because it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Sergeant Bob is a very, very interesting guy. Get a copy of his book and get prepared for it, because it's coming up in a few days. Cop Talk. He's going to be there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So that, my friends, is it for us for the day. I would really appreciate a like before you head on out of here. I know that Henry Dixon and Vientikis and Zulu in the house, along with K Bean, have been demanding likes, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm really bad about asking for that. But I was actually looking at my metrics, and I think it's about 50% of the people who watch the content on this channel are not subscribed, which kind of blew my mind, right? 50% of the people are just not subscribed. So I would love it if you subscribed. I would love it if you hit that like. I really do see it in the metrics. It's really weird. I see that when YouTube thinks we're doing well, they help you do better. So I'd appreciate it if you'd give us a little bit of the extra oomph on your way out of here, because we're done for today. But I want to make sure you're back here tomorrow, because we're going to do it all again. 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is Mountain, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. on the East Coast for that one Florida man. Everybody else have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.